Joined here by good buddy David Waters, Gators Breakdown. He is back in live. And Dave, I got to admit, this has been one of the most interesting off seasons, quote unquote, that we've had, or our good friend Bill King says non-playing portion of the year. Let me start off by asking you this, because you broke the news with the EA Sports College Football, and then EA said not true, but then the week later said was true. I mean, how chaotic is that?
Yeah, EA Sports is right down the road. I'm in Jacksonville. EA Sports, where they're working on a game, is right down the road in Orlando. So, of course, a little bit of connections there. But that is the plan. Could it change? Look, we know how fast college football is changing. Could that have something to do with if they have to go off of a July 12th release date or something? Maybe, but that is the plan. The plan is July 12th. So. It's been kind of crazy since breaking that. It's probably been my most popular tweet ever. Nothing Gator related. That's the most popular tweet I've ever put out. But yeah, it's as long as nothing happens, that's still the planned release date. That from everything I've been told. So I know everybody's waiting for it.
Dave, can you imagine? I tweeted this out earlier today. Could you imagine being in Road to Glory and going to like a G5 program and then going into the portal and asking for millions? Because that's the first thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to go like Tulane or somewhere small, get like 1,000 touchdown passes, and then I'm going to go get my NIL money. That's what I think I'm going to do.
That would be interesting.
What's the first thing you do?
I just want to see how the whole game plays. So I'll fire up a play now exhibition game and just see how it all goes. Because look, I mean, it's been a decade since we've been without this game. I've played Madden very, very sparingly in the last 10 years. Trying to get kind of more familiar with it now because it'll be somewhat similar to that. But yeah, I've just I'm missing that. I didn't hack a console on my PC to get college football revamped or whatever. It's been about 10 years since I've played a college football game. So I'm going to get myself in the swamp and see everything and all the details they got right and wrong.
I'm going to probably take all of my frustrations out on Alabama, being an LSU guy. I think I'm going to put it on junior varsity and score like 100 points in the first half and just like absolutely demolish him for all the craziness that they've done. Alabama fans, don't be mad at me. All right, David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Dave,
I can turn that around and just do Florida LSU since we can't get over that hump either. So,
I mean, you can, well, Dave. So this is interesting. Even getting into reality, there's something I talked about yesterday. Florida and LSU, from a 20-year span, is a lot more alike than people give it credit for. LSU has one more national title in football. But if you want to look at it, I mean, Florida has had not so much recent success, but 2 years ago, Ed Orgeron was 6-6, baby. I mean, it's not as if that this isn't like there's a lot of comparisons there. But let me ask you this, though, because there's been a lot of off-season talk with Billy Napier and his program. Where do you see it as it is right now with them?
It's a critical year 3. In a lot of ways and a lot of viewpoints, do or die year 3 for Billy Napier. And, what does that mean? If you want to go record-wide, everybody looks at that schedule and says, how in the world can Florida be any better when you look at that schedule? And look, even Vegas says they might be better. It's a 5.5 win total, the same as it was last year. And everybody knows the schedule's harder. So if you want to dive into a 5.5 win total, all right, well, Florida might be better. But look, that's not going to cut it. I mean, this is year 3. Doesn't matter how hard the schedule is. Doesn't matter coaching staff turnover. This is a roster you've built for this moment. Year 3, you've got to take advantage. And put it this way, if Florida is headed in the right direction, we'll know. Doesn't matter how hard the schedule is. If Florida is Florida, you go out there and you beat the teams you're supposed to beat. You go out there and you in the losing streak to Kentucky, you beat Central Florida, you beat new coach Mike Elko and Texas A&M. You open up the season by beating Miami. You do those things. If this thing is headed in the right direction, you win those type of games. And then, then maybe you build some momentum. Maybe you get an upset in November that you were maybe not going to get. But heading into this, I mean, it's year 3. It's time. There's no more excuses. It is wins have to matter no matter how hard the schedule looks.
Dave, it's interesting. Because I think that even with what you just said, like they could be the best 7-5 team in the country, right? Like meaning, like if Billy does get over that hump in reference to having a winning season. Are we? And here's another thing: are we 1,000% sure a 7-5 Florida, if they were to get there, would be better than anybody that would get an automatic qualifier in the playoff in the Big 12? Depending on how these games play out. So I do think it's relative to that.
Blake, on your scenario, just how weird would this be? You just said 7-5. Go look at Florida's November and those 5 games. What if Florida starts 7-0 and then you lose to Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State? How would that be viewed? If you start 7-0, but you look at that November, which is part of the toughest schedule I've ever seen. Those are teams that were fighting for playoff spots late in the season this past season, all finishing the top 10-ish to 15-ish in this past season.
All of them would have been in the playoffs this year, Dave.
Exactly.
Right.
Every one of those teams would have been in the playoff. But if you start 7-0, which don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Florida starts 7-0. I more likely how I see it playing out is, they get somewhat of a hot start like they did last year, 5-2 going into Georgia, and then you get an upset in November somewhere along the way. That's probably how I see it playing out. I don't see it starting 7-0 and then ending 7-5.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't. Even if Dave, here's the ultimate question. Even if he's 6-6, but they're highly competitive against really good teams, does Billy get another year?
I think so. I think 6-6 is that 50-50 mark, but I do think, I'm looking at this from an admin perspective.
Right.
All right, they will use the excuse of it was a tough schedule. They will use the excuse of, all right, we'll turn the page. You got your quarterback in DJ Lagway, who's supposed to be your guy in 2025. We'll give you one more shot. We'll give you one more shot because you just played not only a tough schedule in 2025, but probably the toughest stretch of a schedule that a head coach has ever walked into at Florida.
Without a doubt.
And that's not an excuse, a full excuse. Don't get me wrong. It's not, but it is the reality. It is what happened. So, all right, schedule eases up in 2025. We don't even know what 2025 schedule will look like right now, but and you got your quarterback. We'll give you one more shot to prove something.
Dave, he's got to go 2-5 in that last 7-game stretch.
Probably something like that. Yep.
Right. Like if he goes 2-5 there and he upsets, hell, I'll use my school. He upsets an LSU or an Ole Miss or whoever. I think he can buy himself some time. He does have a lot of personnel changes, though. A guy that I'm a little bit familiar with, and Russ Callaway, is going to be promoted to OC. I've seen a lot of Gator fans, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or right here, that actually are a little excited about this. Maybe Billy gets, I don't want to say doesn't have play calling duties or how that's going to amount to, but do you think that Russ is going to have full play calling duties, or is Billy going to still be the one calling plays?
I think I lean towards Napier still calling plays.
Okay.
I won't be completely surprised. I won't be completely shocked if he doesn't. I just think from everything that he has said about it, where he said he gets the pulse of his team, he feels better about his team when he's in that role. And then, a couple of weeks ago, he was asked about it on the official Gator podcast. Are you going to be calling plays this year? And he says yes. And that was 3 weeks ago. All right. Now, does that change? He did also say they were still trying to figure out the responsibilities and the roles for the offensive staff. Apparently Callaway was getting conversations from outside of Florida, from NFL teams and other college
100%.
teams that he might be, can you want to come be on staff for us? But would he stay at Florida and give those other jobs up if he's not the play caller? So that's why it does hang in the back of my head that maybe he will be, he will be more involved. No doubt about it. He'll be more involved. The rumor and the talk was he was more involved with Florida's pretty good red zone offense last year, that he was more in that role last year for the Gator offense. So he'll be heavily involved. The way it works out on game day, I still lean towards Billy Napier being the play caller, and I know we'll get into this in a second, but Billy Napier's made some other hires that made you think he wants to concentrate more on the offense. So maybe it is a better thing if he is the play caller, because you bring in Ron Roberts, who can be head coach of the defense. You bring in some more experienced special teams coaches and strength and conditioning coaches that can help out in those areas where Napier, if he in this do or die critical year, that's another aspect of this, Blake. Is he going to trust somebody else to dig him out of this year 3 hole? Or is he going to I'm going to put it on my shoulders, I'm going to put it on my back, I'm going to do it my way. If we fail, it's going to be my way. I think there's a lot of angles to this.
There is, and Dave, can I be so? Here's how I view it as an outsider, even just looking in here. If you were to put a team in a tier, right, like the last 2 years of teams in tiers, Florida could be a tier 3, tier 4 team. They're the only team in those bottom tiers that can go from there to being in number 1. Okay, because I do think Florida is that program that the right situation happens. Watch out, buddy. Like, we've seen it. Like, this isn't something that we haven't seen.
Right.
I do agree with you with the thing with Billy. I'm interested, though, because you bring up a guy that I know somewhat relatively well because he's the head coach at Southeastern, and Ron Roberts. The head coach of defense makes sense of that for me, though. Is Billy just not going to have – I mean, obviously he'll have say-so, but it seems like he just is going to take his hands off of it and let Ron do everything.
Yeah, that's what it seems like, and also to help, very young defensive coordinator and Austin Armstrong out, who had to learn on the job. I mean, he was a defensive coordinator at Southern Miss before that, but we know this is a bit different. And right. So he had to learn on the job as a first-time SEC defensive coordinator last year, and probably had to learn a lot more than he thought he did. So Ron Roberts comes in from Auburn, a 1-year stint at Auburn under Hugh Freeze, Baylor before that. Had a history at Louisiana with Billy Napier before he took that Baylor job. So there was a lot of familiarity here. So I think, Billy Napier bringing in look, it's fortunate that it happened. I mean, from everything I can gather, Ron Roberts wanted to leave leave Auburn. It wasn't a firing. So he just wanted to get out of there for whatever reason. So can Billy Napier be the benefactor of that? And where it really, we come out of last season, we're thinking Austin Armstrong, and all right, you hope he learned a whole lot last year. But now he's got a confidant. Now he's got a mentor that he can lean on. So the way Billy Napier explained it would be, it's head coach of the defense, but on Saturdays, Austin Armstrong will still be the play caller. I'm sure Roberts can supersede. I'm sure he can give some insight or whatever to that point. There's still a lot of questions. And Roberts even said last week on the Gators podcast that, this spring, that's something we do have to figure out. This spring is going to be very important in how me and Austin work together.
Dave, there just seems like so many question marks in Gainesville.
Yeah.
Right. Like so many things that have to be answered. Can you answer all of them? Can you answer all of the questions? I mean, I know, I understand that you have a little bit more than 6 months to answer them, but I get to a point where, can you, and is this a situation where you can? Okay, David Waters, Gators breakdown. Dave, when does Florida open up spring practice?
March 7th. So about this time next week.
Yeah, same for the Bayou Bengals. Doors open, you go to practice. What's the first thing that David Waters goes and looks at?
It's the defense. I mean, for all the talk, for all the headlines the offense gets, and will Billy Napier be the play caller and all that, do they need to take another step? Absolutely they do. But the defense has got to be better with the offense that have to carry them. That's where it's got to be. You can't go 3 years even date back to Dan Mullen. That's 4 years, 5 years. You can't go that long without fixing the defensive side of the football. I think we know a baseline for the offense. We've seen enough in Billy Napier's 2 years. While not a perfect offense, it's been good enough. If the defense had been just as good, hot seat talk would be a thing we wouldn't even be talking about it right now. We're really talking about hot seat talk because the defense of Florida just has not been there. To me, you've got to get this defense fixed. That's the number one thing to save Billy Napier's job, I think, is that defense has got to be fixed. It's got to catch up. You got to start playing some more complementary football. I do think the offense has a baseline, maybe could take another step with bringing back a Graham Mertz and his experience in second year in the system. But it's all about the defense to me if Billy Napier is to get over that hump.
Let's stay with Graham Mertz. I think he's the catalyst of fair or unfair. He is the guy that's got to lead Billy Napier out of this hole. Dave, there was nobody last offseason that took more criticism from the quarterbacks in the SEC more than Graham Mertz. And all he did was he came out and threw for over 3,000 yards, 20-plus touchdowns, and only 3 picks. I got to be honest, as much as people said negative things about him, I thought he played phenomenally in a lot of games. Even in that first game against Utah, he just didn't have a lot of things go his way. Were you surprised at how good Graham Mertz played last year?
I was. I didn't think he'd be terrible. I did think Wisconsin didn't do him much favors in that last year there, but
Right.
at the same time, I didn't expect what we got from Graham Mertz, and now it's just about taking that next step. You lose Ricky Pearsall, your best receiver, but you have Trey Wilson returning, who was a true freshman last year. So how much can you build on that? So, they started using the tight ends a bit more last year as well. But you lose Trevor Etienne, so that's one of your most explosive playmakers. So is Graham Mertz in this passing game going to be able to make up for some of that explosions that they may have lost in the run game? So I do think it's big that he's coming back. He's got a second year working with Billy Napier in the system. So he did surprise me last year. I had him on the podcast back in December, and he admitted, and something I brought up, the next step is to start passing the ball down the field a bit more. It was a lot of check downs. It was a lot of taking what the defense gives you and all that, which is all fine and good. But if this this offense is going to take another step, it's getting that ball down the field a bit more.
Yeah, ask Jaden Daniels how that works. It was a Heisman. What do they do? You talked about Trevor Etienne leaving and going to Georgia. A two-part question here for you. Number one, what was your reaction to Trevor Etienne going to a better rival in Georgia? And then number two, what do they do there at running back in that rotation, do you think?
It really stings that Etienne's going, as I said, but the most explosive player at that Florida backfield the last couple of years. You do bring Montreal Johnson back, but to see Etienne go to your rival, and that's where it really hurts. I mean, this is Georgia didn't recruit him out of high school. Billy Napier identified him, brought him in, developed him, and now it's you're going to go see him play for your biggest rival, and you'll have to face up against him here in Jacksonville in late October, early November. That's the sting part. It's not that you only lost him; it's that you got to go up against him, and he'll have a lot more talent around him at Georgia. So we'll see the steps that he can make. But for Florida, as I mentioned, Montreal Johnson's there. This will be his third season at Florida to lead that group. Treyon Webb at a Trinity Christian Jacksonville was a true freshman last year. He'll get a lot more carries. Of course, this year he'll slide into that second role. And I think while not as explosive as Etienne, I still think is another good option. And then Cam Carroll from Tulane came in last year, tore his knee up. He probably won't be going through a full bore spring. But Florida's got Kanan Daniels, Jaden Ball, two true freshmen that will get plenty of reps this coming up spring to try and be that third back all throughout spring practice.
Two more for you here, Dave. Number one, if you had to make a prediction right now, how and look, we're in February, so your opinions and thoughts are not held against you in February on what happens in the 2024 season. But how do you see this season playing out?
5-7 to 7-5. I have a hard time seeing much better than that because of the schedule. Now, if this defense takes some unprecedented leap, then maybe you squeeze out 8. I mean, just given the schedule, it's hard for me to see any more than 8. But I'm even stretching. This defense has got to take a massive step to even get to 8. So, no better than 7-5. That's probably where I would put it. I think that would certainly be enough to give Billy Napier another year and see what happens with taking over with DJ Lagway the next year. But just like it's hard to pick out specific wins and specific losses. But you take a look at the early season schedule. You got Miami, Texas A&M, Mississippi State. To me, you got to go 3-0 in that stretch.
No doubt.
Just to You open up with Miami. Mario Cristobal, Billy Napier came in the same years. They've had some recruiting battles over the last couple of years. So that's a big game for both programs coming in. I think you want to get that, and also to quiet the noise. I mean, you can't go game one and go lose, and then all the noise just already just comes at you. To get past that noise hump, then you got UCF at home. You can't lose to them as an in-state, quote-unquote, lower-tier school. You got to beat them. And then, Tennessee, Kentucky before you go in that rough stretch in November. So, like I said, going into that in November, 6-1, 5-2 at worst, and then you got to go try and steal some wins in November.
I know you're going to hate this, and I'm not going to ask you to respond because you cover the team. I spend every single penny if Billy does not make it through the year and go over to Oxford and say, what's up?
He'd be my number one.
You cannot spare any expense to go get him Because Dave, I'm serious when I say this. And listen, I'm going to get popped by LSU fans for saying this. Lane Kiffin goes to Gainesville. It's over for a lot of people.
It's a dangerous combo.
It's a danger.
And I know at one time he would have loved the Florida job. I don't know if success at Ole Miss and, Florida not being Florida recently would change his mind or anything, but I know there's been heavy interest before. I think look, and I used to be against it, kind of. I needed to see more from Lane Kiffin, but this new age of college football, and some people will say, "Oh, it's just another Dan Mullen hire. He don't like to recruit." Well, I mean, seeing what he's doing in the transfer portal like he has to, I think he gets docked too much for recruiting and the like. But I think his attitude, his approach, his style of offense, I think I'd like it.
Well, and another thing too, Dave, Mississippi, they just don't have it's I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, Florida in-state recruiting versus Mississippi's is night and day different. It is drastically different. I mean, he can't win by just recruiting high school in the state of Mississippi.
He has to do what he's doing.
He has to do what he's doing, and he did it. So that is, Dave, I got to ask you this one question before I get you out of here. I've been really vocal on this Tennessee and Nico Iamaleava stuff in reference to, look, if he's on a plane with a booster, let's call it what it is. It's a recruiting violation. Don't try to, sugarcoat me of what it really is. But what everyone seems to forget in all of this is that the NCAA is also allegedly investigating or looking into the Jaden Rashada stuff. What can you tell us on that?
Not much since it's come out, but it certainly is. And I think we knew once the Jaden Rashada stuff came out that this was probably going to come down the road at some point, just because of the headlines and the headline of $13 million. And if that's what he was promised and not promised or whatever, not much since then. I do think the Tennessee case in the NCAA last week probably helps Florida a good bit. It seems like the NCAA doesn't have much teeth right now to do anything. I know they're going to appeal, and we'll see what comes out of all that stuff. But, for now, look, the way the NCAA is, if they come and find out Florida did some improper stuff that goes on there, they don't really harshly punish people anymore. They just don't. I mean, I think maybe you come to some agreement and the punishments are, look, Florida's made moves. They've gotten rid of staffers that might have been involved or not involved. I mean, it lets you know something's been there. Of course, Marcos Kester-Walker no longer with the program.
Right.
He was, NIL director a little bit there at Florida. So look, obviously, we're not going to hide behind the fact that something went on. I just think in the end, I just don't think much comes of it. Maybe scholarship or two reduction, pay some fine or whatever. But the days of getting a death penalty, even close to a death penalty, anything like that just doesn't happen anymore.
Dave, I'm just, Friday, I think, was a bigger hit than people realize in some senses. Because for me, I don't like the NCAA. They have come down on the school that I root for, cheer for, and cover 4 times in the last 7 years for things that are just some things that weren't even true that wind up being resolved. But my whole thing in all this has been, Dave, you got to have somebody that investigates things that are going on and they're against the rules. I hate the NCAA. Hate them. Okay. They've made my life a lot living hell at times. But at the same time, I guess I just get to a place where, Dave, if the NCAA is done, who investigates recruiting violations?
Right.
I talked to an SEC coordinator this week, and he tells me, hey, man, I know of a kid during the dead period that's on a plane going to talk to an NIL group in another state. What do we do?
Right.
There's nothing that we can do. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think it's a little insane that people just don't want things to be investigated. Am I nuts in my line?
No. I think so. Or nothing's ever going to change. You'll have your same top teams that stay top teams because nothing ever changes.
Right.
But maybe at some point it probably is going to be up to the conferences to.
Can you imagine Greg Sankey trying to tell an SEC team that he's hitting them with recruiting violations? It's not going to happen.
No.
All right, David Waters, Gators Breakdown, buddy. You've been a regular here. Thank you so much for your time. Tell everybody where they can catch all the things that you guys are doing.
Yep. At GatorDave_SEC on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. GatorsBreakdown.com or your favorite podcast platform, YouTube as well out there. Gonna take one final look at the class of 2025 this week. Kind of get a peek,